Hi. Good evening. My name is Matakis Tarrant. I'm from the Shinnecock Indian Nation here in Southampton, New York. I'm honored to be here today and thank the church for extending the invitation for me to come and share a little bit of music. And I'm happy that they asked me to play this flute because there's going to be spoken word tonight, and I wanted to just kind of clear the air before we bring the words in. So this is a good segue as opposed to singing a song with more words and speaking more. So I'm not going to speak too much. I'm going to play one more song, and then I'm going to bow out and leave it to our wonderful talent here tonight. But thank you again for coming. Oh, thank you.
Let's give another round of applause for Matakis Tarrant. I got it. I can't think of a better way to start off this evening, so thank you so much. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Talena. I'm the programming manager here at the church, and I want to welcome you to Word. It's a writer's spoken word series that we aim to present here quarterly, and each program features a different theme. Tonight's being on transformation. Thank you to Sam, Kristen, Justin, Sherry, Sarah, and our founders, April and Eric. I couldn't do this program or produce the level of events we do here without all of you. I want to acknowledge the land on which we stand, land that is traditionally Shinnecock, Montaukett, and Manhasset unceded land. I acknowledge Mother Earth and the resources it provides, honoring all Indigenous communities, their fundamental relationships to this region, and their continued fight to protect and preserve the sacred land. The history of the Native community on Long Island and all over is one of genocide, corruption, and abuse. Within that history is the resilience, strength, and power of the Native people. If you live out here and know very little about the Shinnecock Nation, I encourage you to get to know your neighbors, make friendships, listen to their stories, and discover ways that your own skills can support them in their efforts towards justice. We only have one planet, and it needs to be shared. Thank you. Tonight's program features writers the Reverend Holly Haile Davis, Ella Engel-Snow, Candace Hill, Kristen Santori, and Pacifique Irankunda. Thank you to all of the writers for accepting our invitation. This program is meant to provide a welcoming space for writers to share their work. Reading is integral to writers, and their words need to not only be read but heard, just as art is meant to be seen. Please help yourself to the refreshments in the back, and thank you to our reception sponsors. You may have noticed the brown paper and crayons on your table. As you listen to this evening, I encourage you to write down words or lines that inspire you, questions or comments that arise. We will conclude this program with an intimate conversation featuring all the writers, and we'd love to hear how this evening has impacted all of you. So, reflecting on this theme and how it kind of came to be, I was really compelled by the idea that transformation is often recognized when change is visible. And I think that was kind of my own sort of personal interpretation of it, kind of reflecting on moments of transformation in my life and realizing that I didn't fully acknowledge it until I had like seen myself change. And while I was going through it, I was more just kind of focused on like the painful aspects of transformation and not really so focused on that what I was going through was leading to change. So I was interested in, like in the heart of it and other people's experience of the uncomfortable nature of leaving behind who you are to discover who you can become. But as this program has transformed and evolved, so has kind of my perspective on transformation, and having worked closely with my collaborator, Kathy Engel, and discussing what transformation means, what it means to us, how we view it, getting to know some of the writers here this evening, and just reflecting on my own work here at the church, I really started to think of the relationship between transformation and community, and how evenings like this, when community comes together to share their words, their stories, their fears, especially in the troubling times we live in, is kind of when I realized that transformation is at its strongest when there's community behind it. So I just, on like the larger world scale of change and positive impacts, I think it really starts within your home, within your town, within the people you share it with. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Maybe it'll change after tonight, but yes, I'm eager to hear from our readers tonight, most of whom are from the East End, all of whom are part of the writers community. Thank you all for contributing to the ever-changing meaning of this complex theme. And with that, I will leave you with a quote from the renowned poet Tony Cade Bambara. Words are to be taken seriously. I try to take seriously acts of language. Words set things in motion. I've seen them doing it. Words set up atmospheres, electrical fields, charges. I've felt them doing it. Words conjure. I try not to be careless about what I utter, write, sing. I'm careful about what I give voice to. Thank you.
As we're in a church, much different than the churches I often frequent, I will tell the truth and say that I am here because of my love and respect for Kathy. I couldn't say no, so I said yes, which then requires me to build a bit of a framework, because the readings that I will share tonight are very specific in the time frame of May 2020 to August 2020. Those were months when I could not come home to Shinnecock. I was with my husband in his home in Akwesasne, Ontario, and the borders were closed. And 2 college girls home from campus, hunting for toilet paper. There are very specific things about that spring of 2020. And one of the things that happened to me is I was invited to write. After applying for the position, saying, and I know that you will not ask me, but I'm going to apply anyway. So Sometimes the unexpected comes to pass. May 27th, 2020. Under the several headings that the people who printed this put: contemporary culture, leadership, racial justice, theological reflections, mission engagement, and so the words from my heart I will share with you. In the merry month of May, Winisho Wanamatu, all that is beautiful, Spirit of God, a Shinnecock prayer. Mrs. Vicki Tarrant, Hidatsa from Fort Berthold, mother, grandmother, beloved. Our hearts are broken. She and more than 200,000 people around the world have recently died from the COVID-19 virus. As our minds try to accept all that is going on in our world, in our families, and in our lives, this is not the merry month of May we might have anticipated 6 months ago. The Revised Common Lectionary shows the Gospel of John with readings from chapters 10, 14, 17, and 20, calling for an exclusive and excluding divine care? No, that would only paint a narrow-sighted manifestation of the holy, and it too easily lends itself to misappropriation by the likes of crusaders, anti-Semites, religious zealots, those who see nothing wrong with cultivating what Dr. John Dominic Crossan identifies as the genocidal germ inherent in fundamentalism and in other modes of ferocious self-righteousness. A pandemic seems to be an ideal time to broaden our reflection, an ideal time to seek and to share in promoting various ways to care for one another. Sadly, it is also crucially necessary in this time to share ways in which to mourn with all whom we must surrender to a most unexpected death. There has been and yet shall be lives and dear ones lost to this disease. Although John's Gospel expresses farewell discourses this month, we do well to remember that we are not alone in this world or even in this time of sickness or weakness. Making phone calls, writing letters, emails to visit with those from whom we are separated, enabling young people to be okay even in the midst of the unknown, and to be okay with envisioning more than one alternative plan for their immediate future while showing them appreciation for helping the elders in their families and in their neighborhoods. Continuing our justice work by serving those whose suffering is due to and is increased manifold by this virus. The John passages will show us cowering disciples, and we might well see ourselves trembling at what all goes on round about us just now, but fear not. The divinity and the holiness of the Spirit is with those who tremble, not fearful, but empowering us to be creative beings in the self-image of our loving Creator. Memorial Day. I'm aged enough to have grown up with old folks who call the national holiday Decoration Day. Always a remembrance, the reading of the honor roll, decorating graves with flags and flowers, and generally honoring those who have mostly died too soon amid the conflicts and war zones that patriotism demanded. But this year, might we broaden our focus and create a Memorial Day dedicated to those now gone due to illness and strongly representing our commitment to caring for the living who are hurting by caring for and remembering all those who have in these months lost their dearest loved ones and who are grieving so deeply. Might we memorialize not for embattlements, national or political enlistment, but to allow for all of us together to reclaim in this Memoriam 2020 and create a way to truly honor also those whom we could not memorialize with wakes and funerals, for it was not within our reach to do so. Strength, hope, and honoring those now gone and those now surviving, that is within our reach. Inasmuch as we are not waiting for the world to return to what it was several months ago, we find ourselves creating for newness, not waiting but creating mutuality in the struggles of societal division, of poverty, of racism, of classism, of warism, of the violence that has now visited millions of our neighbors in new and fierce circumstances. May we humbly recognize ourselves in each other and take steps to walk new roads of love and peace and health. June 18th, 2020. Miquantash yean kusakoyu, rememberest thou me as unto our sacred hills. A Shinnecock prayer. In memoriam, to honor Kevin Tarrant, Bear Clan of the Ho-Chunk Nation of Nebraska, and the Sky Clan of the Hopi Tribe of Arizona. Beloved and respected son, nephew, brother, husband, father, uncle, friend. Traditional singer, dancer, teacher, a keeper of culture, our hearts are shattered. Our dear Kevin and 340,000 plus people have died during the COVID-19 outbreak. Are you ready for June meeting? A question asked with great anticipation among the Montaukett people, Unkachog, and Shinnecock. My Shinnecock people have celebrated June meeting without interruption for centuries. Historically, in our sacred Shinnecock Hills, the ground upon which the Great Spirit placed us long before 1043 BCE, a date to which pottery shards attest, but a date much more recent than our DNA recalls. David was doing something to someone in Israel in 1043 BCE. We are an ancient people in our ancient territory. The English name June meeting is not nearly as old as the Strawberry Thanksgiving. We offer gratitude for the good gifts of Mother Earth. They are ours for another year. And June meeting is more. It is a homecoming, a remembrance of those who have passed during the winter, a ceremony, flowers and strawberries. June meeting predates Christianity. Our holy, primeval ritual might have been outlawed or destroyed like so many other of our God-given traditional ways, were it not for the foresight of priest Paul Cuffey's inclusion of this traditional Strawberry Thanksgiving into the liturgical calendar. Priest Paul, a Shinnecock Indian, or Indian preacher, as the roadside historical marker states, near his solitary grave. June meeting is now observed on the first Sunday in June at Shinnecock, the second Sunday at Unkachog, and it is maintained to this day not because of any appreciation of our native culture by the European settlers, who arrogantly believed that they alone brought sacred beliefs to a land devoid of any divine spirit. These missionizers who recognize no supreme God that they did not name, footnote 1. Among many natives, when the first wild strawberries are found in nature, we return thanks that this first fruit continues to come each year. Our June meeting Thanksgiving has continued unbroken for millennia and is, therefore, too important to allow it to be stolen away. Priest Paul wisely protected this inestimable right. June's lectionary begins with the Great Commission, an ambiguous first step, as many biblical scholars are not persuaded that these were Jesus' own words, "Go hither and yon." Soon we find admonitions to not take foreign roads. And by the third Sunday in June, we're inundated with legalistic equations quantifying the worth of masters over the worth of slaves, the worth of humans over the worth of wildlife, the benefit to those who welcome profits and the virtuous over seemingly those who do not welcome profits. We might suppose that there is a transactional nature to the dispensing of gospel good news. With this sort of wheeling and dealing, it's not surprising to uncover numerous papal bulls repeatedly declaring the doctrine of discovery. After all, manipulation of people and greed for riches is also absolutely biblical, albeit less dignified than a consecrated crusade, a divine quest. Professor Mitzi J. Smith shines a light on another great co-mission of the church and the crown, footnote 2, deeming undiscovered lands terra nullis, empty land belonging to no one, allowing for a legal way to steal lands and a lawful way to dispatch those who may be found in these lands. Under church sanction, lands are stolen, people are abducted, enslaved, subjugated, mutilated, slaughtered, and murdered. To the brown and black peoples of the earth, the deadly anything but good news, the white, blue-eyed Jesus, behold your God, raping people and land in the name of the Cloroxed Christ, footnote 3. Baptizing in the name of love? No, I do not see evidence of love. Those ye delegated and charged to go forth without benefit of gold, carrying neither staff nor provisions, might have recognized the general theme of hospitality, as they were supposed to teach hospitality, but they did not recognize the significance of the spontaneous hospitality proffered them by the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Stick to the lost sheep of Israel and go nowhere among the Gentiles. The overwhelming message of this Jesus was to love God with all that you are, then love neighbor as you love yourself. If Jesus had been their teacher, they utterly lack understanding as to the meaning of his life, his action, his words. And that today, the U.S. is sending COVID-19 infected people back to Haiti and Guatemala is heinous. I'd venture to say that most, if not all, of those creating and implementing this cruel and deadly policy would proudly call themselves Christian. It is not a bridge too far to say that the doctrine of Christian discovery is not love, and the theft of America's indigenous people's land and the theft of Africa's indigenous people's bodies is not love, and sending people with COVID-19 virus anywhere except to a hospital is not love. It's pretending to be Christianity. And the last piece, from July 14th, 2020. Masakit Munsumana Wikwananot Supsnipi, Tabane. Our land has truly been blessed by the great God of nature. A Shinnecock prayer. In loving memory, Edith Thunderbird Gregoire returned to the spirit world May 31st, 2020. Sister, mother to many, grandmother to more. A respected Shinnecock elder who passed during the pandemic, but not of the virus, so her children could say goodbye, and she did not have to die alone. That meant the world to us. We are so grateful for her life, a loving woman of faith. My daddy changed the world. I quote Gianna Floyd, 6-year-old daughter of George Floyd, killed by police in Minnesota last week. Yet when I consider the unreasonable cost of Mr. Floyd's accomplishment, surely there were less violent ways to get the attention of white sisters and brothers in this country and in this world. Substitutionary atonement is a dangerous concept. To glorify suffering is to render suffering sacred. To glorify suffering is to render George Floyd's suffering sacred. To do so is to glorify the sin of defilement. In the 1990s, I had the honor of supping with Reverend Dr. William Sloan Coffin. We were guests at the home of Reverend Donna Schaffer over in Riverhead. And naturally, our conversations included my being a Shinnecock Indian and how my perspective was necessarily different to his. There came a point when I felt that I was not making my meaning clear. So when in doubt, quote, Dr. Dolores S. Williams, that's the best advice I can give anyone. I had recently visited Dr. Williams at Union Seminary, and we had discussed white siblings who live in the fear that someone might push the proverbial button, ending life as they know it. She said, it could be said that the button has already been pushed on my people, a sentiment that, as an Indigenous woman, I could recognize. And so I said to Dr. Coffin, Professor Dolores Williams says that it could be said that the button has already been pushed on her people. I added that Native people are interested in helping the whites continue a centuries-long reign of terror against the brown peoples of the earth. He asked me if I really thought people would choose to end it all rather than help this America continue. 'Twas a decade before 9/11. I merely asked, why would we be willingly continue to labor in a deadly, unjust system for more of the same? Dinner conversation has its limits. Lessons are intended to plant a seed deep within those with ears to listen. July's lectionary considers the Matthean version of Sower of Seeds, prefaced by a particular action's unexpected, yea, unintended results. In Matthew 11, John the Baptist and Jesus, both divine messengers, one with fire, one with cool water, but neither seemed able to capture the hearts of those who together could have helped make their world a more loving, more just, a better place. The hearers would neither dance together nor mourn together. Even the untutored understands. A 6-year-old can imagine love over hate. And if sowers of seeds don't know the difference between good ground and thorny, rocky terrain and soil with ulterior motives, then why should they remain in charge of the planting? John's fiery doctrinal law and order mandating repent, come to the Jordan, be baptized, prepare for judgment, make ready for a new life. In contrast, Jesus' commitment to the least of these, water for all who thirst, and his passion for the God of justice didn't appeal to those who revel in their ability to mete out provision, punishment, blessing, or curse as they saw fit. Religious and civil authorities covertly cooperating with occupying Romans are not interested in an egalitarian society. Part of my perspective includes my own experience last summer, 2019. I reported a troubling email that was sent to my Morelight church, which I believed was threatening in nature. This email targeted by name the mother of an interracial family of church members. We also housed a Head Start on the premises. That was up in Potsdam, New York. I'd been home on Shinnecock and showed my email to the tribal chairman and several council members, all of whom had criminal justice background. They recommended that I go to the state police and have the disturbing email documented and alert the authorities, after which, upon returning to my church with the upstate police incident number in my hand, I could alert the upstate police and ask that they take closer notice of our building and grounds for the safety of all concerned. The state trooper laughed at me. After my husband and I waited 25 minutes in the waiting area without seeing anyone, the tall, burly white trooper glanced at the text of the email and laughed. When you're finished laughing, would you please document this report and kindly issue me an incident number to take to the police department local to my church, who thankfully took very seriously the fact that individuals, interracial families, Head Start children, and elderly church folk must be kept safe in their town. Black and brown and indigenous people have thousands of such stories. So when will our white siblings listen? Here's where I will stop. I thank you for your kind attention.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Hi, my name is Ella Engel-Snow, and I think it says stuff about me on there, so I'm going to skip that part. But thank you so much, Talena, and the church, and I'm really honored to be reading amongst this group of writers, and thank you, Matakis, for opening. The first poem that I'm going to read is called Migration. For every mother who is or has been separated from her children. Monarch butterflies may take 4 generations to migrate from the Mexican Ojamel fir forests to eastern United States. Just outside the city of Atlisco, a mother keeps 7 glasses of water on an altar, so her 7 sons crossing the US border won't die of thirst. How is it beautiful for a butterfly and illegal for a man? This next poem is called Heart of Palm. Woody stalk, off-white, slippery crunch, subtle star of my salad, hint of metal on the tongue, awkward delight, bobbing in citric acid. Is it troublesome to love the notion of eating a tree's heart? Some palm are propagated to replace rainforests. Even trees can be weaponized. Some palm killed for that one tender organ. Any palm could be hacked, packed, and tracked to my insatiable, my double fist hollowed out, tin mouth. Listen, for the sound of empty cans. Ping, ping, like a tree without a pulse, setting roots on stolen land. This poem, well, I think the next few poems are part of a series that are kind of about my relationship to my understanding, a God of my understanding. And also, this poem has explicit language, so just a heads up to everyone. It's called Another Name for God. Calculate every ounce of yield, avalanche of unread email. Every day I ask another name for God. Tell me the number when I stop counting. Did I rest or fuck? I have no original poem for you. Just another list that may or may not crumple in the cold, wet ball of my palm. If we meet, despite my casual look, I'm nervous for you to know me and thirsty to be seen. Maybe I stop trying to say something important. After all, the wind is thrashing at my door. If this page sails through the sunlit day, wouldn't that be enough? This is a pandemic poem that I wrote in the first weeks of quarantine. And it's called Somber Days I Write for the Collards. I pray my legs out of bed. Every morning is practice. To bathe, what a pain. But oh, oh, hallelujah, the collards sink me to my knees. Stain my pants, I love you. Thicker the stalk, deeper the root, to hold our dead and still bear new leaves. This field is for gatherers. Long fingernails dig forgotten carrots. I speak to a dust god underground. What can I offer you now? Thank you for bearing with me. Give me 1 second. Okay, this is the last one I'll read. And I like to think of this as speculative prose. It's called Wilda. Wilda rolled herself flat on the ground, spread out her organs, and meticulously arranged them in order of want. The doctors and wireless ghosts gasped in unison as she lay her brain down just underneath her heart. They go together, she said, but if they make me choose, I'll keep my heart. She knew some important organs would have to be offered. Deliveries, it seemed, were the only thing preventing the Seventh World War. Wireless ghosts weren't always so sanguinary. They had been human once. After the wars, touch, and imagination were outlawed. Some went years without intimacy and collaboration. Eventually, they lost the willingness to feel. Wilda imagined the doctors would cook her brain down into emotidium, a compound used in smart device manufacturing. Or maybe they would dry her out into something smokable. She wasn't afraid of what would happen to her body after the loss of major organs, but she mourned the story she would leave. She wanted to understand the experience of wireless ghosts. How long did it take to become artificial? Could it really happen to anyone? Wilda had never prayed on purpose, and she was skeptical about anything having to do with some god. But she got down on her knees and prayed anyway, out of desperation. She rose up in prayer, humming. It seemed impossible for that tone to come out of her narrow body, but it was the sound of the ocean, the sound of Wilda summoning her God. Wilda could no longer tell if she was here or in her dreams. The wireless ghosts were still standing by, waiting for her to deliver. She began swaying over her organs like broomcorn in wind, her gestures millions of tiny vibrations. She hovered over her heart and began rubbing it gently. Without knowing how or why, her other hand slid down between her legs. Wilda cupped her hand where it felt good, making slow circular motions, pressing into her bone, moaning her song. The boundaries between Wilda, the wireless ghosts, the doctors, and all the passers-by dissolved in a primal swirl of lust and wilderness. She no longer had conscious control over her movement. All she could do was hum and throb. One of the wireless ghosts twitched. "Shoot her," a doctor ordered. "She is making evil." But each of the wireless ghosts began twitching, undulating, one after the other. "Ah," whispered one of the ghosts, "a corporeal memory. I think it's a feeling. Pleasure."
Good evening, everyone. Happy to see so many faces. Big night in Sag Harbor, Southampton, East Hampton, and the Hamptons in general tonight, so happy you all can make it. I'm going to read a poem by Gwendolyn Brooks first. Short poem. Oh, my name's Candace Hill. Candace Hill Montgomery on the visual side. Pygmies are pygmies, still though perfect on Alps, Edward Young. But can see better there and laughing there? Pity the giants wallowing on the plain, giants who bleat and chafe in their small grass, seldom to spread, thank you, seldom to spread the palm, to spit come clean. Pygmies expand in cold, impossible air. Cry fire on giant shine, pour glory, which pounds breastbone punily, screeches, and has reached no Alps, or knows no Alps to reach. Blank art. Hyacinths, no sun, ajar. Floor cork wall 8 by 8. Mac woke about his article. Read, it's demanded. Can you stand it? In hypoallergenic, is that certain? Right title or hyperanalytic? Is we to be pitied like black as fuck number, or not as much? Lurking as those lying on a sofa, embittered in colors, ascending upwards, excruciating to him, copious grin with the pained feeling, temple veins filled in. Why do I hate those people in paintings? So sorrowful, masks, mockery not twinkling. Do they weep glaringly with oranges off camera, rolling underneath all that paint on tables? Beneath angles, much better through the though. Can he be any minute saying that's enough? Standing there? Doggone it, those rectangles, I swear. So thick, heaven knows they need help too. To look like panes of glass, dude, boo. Who cares? Who's there remembering to add more paint, embody the skank, those shtick fingers tingling with hurt, clumsy, without sniveling? What religion? Who can tell imagery when to stop, disappear? Lunch is not one square privacy here. Triangular moon, reticence, so vulgar, reminding of Sarah. Extraordinary metrics, those 3 strings connecting, specific death moments, before choosing beyond objects. One Macintosh revealing not supreme beam mystery, but address book jottings, the odds and ends of the black hand always scribbling, be famous, underline the front, behind ups, onto concepts, 2 bars of gold challenged hiccups, igniting enfleurage, the fullness of books, semi-angular abstract bodies, exciting people, some triumphing over talk love, under eyes, tissue wiped brown visage in. Disguise once, prayed for money, for someone, unknown hair uncombed, a grandmother, a comfort in that inarticulate purpose, unknown hair dethroned. Thank you.
Hello. For those of you who don't know me, I am Kristen. I work here. Happy Saturday. Thank you for being here, and thank you for including me in your writing and speaking of your spoken words. I'm a little nervous, sorry. This piece is titled More Than Meets the Eye. They'll teach you butterflies, caterpillars, frogs, tadpoles, elementary, metamorphosis. Later, they'll teach you of Greek gods and goddesses, of Roman gods and goddesses, metamorphosis, of bodies transformed into other bodies and forms. They'll teach you God, Yahweh, Elohim, Allah, Brahma, Krishna, Leela, Jah, and infinite others. They'll teach you science and nature of earth, air, water, fire, transformed in space, creation. Right now, you're 4 years old. You've just paused your mud pie making to watch Marvin, the caterpillar, mesmerized by his crescent chomps carved into an oak leaf. Mom is at the door, the sun is descending, it's time to come inside. Marvin is forbidden to be inside the house. All bugs are forbidden to be inside the house. A policy Mom put into place because you're makeshift and farm. Stage an evacuation mission. Up the side, out the ventilation, single file into Mom's kitchen. Bugs are forbidden to be inside the house. Chock full of nuts. It's that heavenly coffee. It's okay, Marvin. Dad has a collection in the garage where he stores his spare hardware, his loose nuts and bolts. It's okay, Marvin. Dad has one he can spare. They'll teach you cycles. Birth, life, death. Right now, you're 4 years old, reaching high on your tip-top toes for the awl. You know it's an awl because your mother told you it's an awl, Grandpa's awl. He used it to make things. They'll teach you cycles, life, death, birth. Right now, you're 4 years old, making holes in the yellow lid so Marvin can breathe. Chock full of nuts. It's that heavenly coffee. At the bottom, mud pie, twigs, leaves, and Marvin, nestled in full on his crescent chomp leaf, safe and secure as you scamper off inside. They'll teach you cycles. Absorption, evaporation, condensation, rain. Absorption, evaporation, condensation, rain. Right now, you're 4 years old, and the storm your father spoke about last supper is here and upon you. Mom is studying her anatomy and physiology textbooks, busying herself with crafts. Dad is working overtime at the power station, comes home, eats, sleeps, wakes, eats, leaves, repeats. And you have your colors and your daydreams, fascinated by the sound and vision outside your window, safe and secure within the storm. They'll teach you school. They'll put you on a bus, send you out into the world. Right now, you're 4 years old. You've never been on a school bus, and it is a beautiful day. You're smiling as you swing high into an ascent, laughing with the freedom of the breeze as it trails through your hair as you descend. A flash of yellow, you ascend again, chock full of nuts. It's on its side, half immersed in a puddle of water beneath the deck. Feet skid in the dirt, chain link rattles above you, joyride halted, jolts you across the yard. They will teach you school. Books, authors, stories. They'll tell you their stories. They'll ask you for yours. You write about this moment, about Marvin. And the professor hands the draft back to you with the words, well written, may have missed the point of the assignment. The unspoken question is asked. You sit one-on-one with the doctor of letters. And in the shape of the space he creates, he shares his story, illuminating the keys to your assignment. You teach yourself. Coltrane, Davis, Ellington. You revisit Dylan, Floyd, Morrison. You speak the words of Angelou, McCullers, Hesse. You share a howling laugh with a wolf's moment of being. Transformers. You transform letters into words, into stories, into scenes upon the silver screen in your mind. The projectionist, a once trigger-snapping delinquent, now known and part of the assignment. You review your life. You review the joy, the beauty, the mysterious, the coincidental, the wonder, and you review the bumps and the bruises and the scars and the traumas. You review life lessons and learn lessons of life from observing the observer observing. you begin to transform your narrative. You plant a seed, begin a quest, title the paper. Right now, you're 4 years old, and you can't get the yellow lid off fast enough. Leaves and twigs float in muddy water. Where is Marvin? Flutter, flutter. Sudden light disorientation lands with grace upon your shoulder. Flutter, flutter. A dog barks. A bird sings. Flutter, flutter. You know the word. It takes you a minute. Flutter, flutter. Moth. Marvin. Flutter, flutter, flutter. New wings feel freedom's first flight, leaving an infinitesimal breeze through your hair. They will teach you Webster's definitions, words, discipline, consistency, innate, essence, nature, nurture, identity. On a Sag Harbor sidewalk, you will see a carpenter bee, unmoving, lifeless. Is it dead? Does it matter? Your arms are full, you have somewhere to be. You must keep walking, you must ignore the bee. You are unable to look away from the bee. And as you step beside the bee, you glance at the unmoving, lifeless, unmoving bee. And yet it moves. And it moves you. Afraid of direct contact, you pick up a stick, point it at the bee, offer the bee a ride to safer ground. The bee accepts. Twig lifted, the bee is unable to fight gravity and carry itself, and it plummets to the sidewalk upon its back with a heavy thwap. Did you just traumatize this bee by attempting to help it? Why stop for a bee? Your arms are full, you have somewhere to be. Is this neurotic? Is this evidence of a savior's complex? Why stop for a bee in the first place? What are you to this bee? What is this bee to you? Afraid of direct contact. Your arms are full, and you have a hand to spare. What are you to this bee? What is this bee to you? Finger plucked from the ground, carried away, placed upon a leaf. You make a safe place for the bee. You have somewhere to be. You make a safe place for the bee. You sit with the bee. You have somewhere to be. You sit with the bee. Administer sweet water. Intention, awareness, sentient kindness. You sit with the bee. You have somewhere to be. You sit with the bee. Observe the bee, rehydrating, reviving, reaching for life. You sit with the bee until peace finds you both. You do have somewhere to be. Ferry the bee to the other side of the road, away from the thundering sidewalk steps of footfall traffic, delivered to the leaves and the grass at the foot of the dead. In their care, the bee's unknown fate, to be or not to be, is to be watched over by friends or welcomed by the same. As you drive away, you wonder about the bee's fate. You speak of the bee to your friends. They tell you what they think the bee thinks about the ordeal, and you wonder what the bee thinks. When you arrive home later in the evening, you're still thinking about the bee, wondering how a carpenter bee could have such a butterfly effect. It rains that evening, and in the peace of the springtime mist, you wonder if the bee, too, is in peace. And as you listen to the soft patting rain upon the earth, you think of all of the bugs you've met all along the way, and you remember, recall, and relive Marvin. They'll teach you Webster's definition, a word. Right now, we're 4 years old. Marvin is alive, and we are full of wonder, grateful transformation exists. Thanks.
Hello. My name is Pacifique, and I'm from Burundi. It's a small country in East Africa. I currently live in Brooklyn, and I'm spending 2 weeks here in residency at the church. Thank you again for the founders of the church and Talena for inviting me to be part of this program. I'm going to read from my memoir, but before I read, I want to start by briefly sharing a story of how I began to write. The first story I wrote was called The Color of a Sound. I was exploring this theme of transformation, trying to turn some of my memories into stories. And a friend of mine and a wonderful writer named Tracy included this story, The Color of Sound, in a book called Good Prose. It's a book on writing. He wrote it with his editor named Richard Todd. And in this book, they write that the ultimate reward of memoir may be to produce a work in which the facts are preserved, but the experience transformed. There is a passage in a Good Prose which I thought about a lot when I was working on my book. And the passage goes like this. That if you can go back to the source and see your memories whole, you can create truer versions of what you remember. You tell the stories accurately and artfully as your abilities allow. If you succeed, you replace the fragments of memory with something that has its own shape and meaning, a separate thing that has value in itself. The delight that memoir can offer is like the delight a woodworker may feel when putting the finishing touches on a beautiful desk. The desk is different from the wood forever, and the good memoir is different from the memories behind it. Not a violation of them, but different, and different, of course, from the actual experience that gave birth both to memory and to memoir. When I began working on my book, writing brought me back fond memories of a time in my childhood when I enjoyed listening to elders telling stories. And I ended my book describing that tradition of storytelling in a chapter called The Times of Stories, and I'm going to read to you a passage from that chapter. When I was a child, most people in Burundi's villages had round houses made of wood and mud with thatched roofs. And inside the house, there was a rounded fireplace built of clay. It had the shape of an inflated tire. Around the fireplace, there were usually traditional hand-woven mats on which children would lie or sit, waiting for dinner or bedtime or stories. It was a tradition in Burundi for elders to tell stories to children, and so in most households, every evening was story time. Some elders were particularly good at telling stories, and they were usually known for these beyond the household. They were called the good storyteller, for instance, or the funny old man. These elders were like magnets to children. The way they told the stories was more important than the stories themselves. You might have already heard a story that bored you, but when these elders repeated it, you would be kicking your legs up and pedaling your feet, laughing. The good storytellers could do more than make you laugh. Sometimes a story would become more and more puzzling as they told it, and they would still be waiting for a revelation when the story ended. The elders seemed to enjoy this effect. They also told sad stories that made my eyes well up with tears. Sad stories often began with "in the old days," or "when I was young," or "before you were born," or "it used to be." If a story began with the phrase, "there once was, there shall never be," you sensed that the story was going to be fictional. What was it about these elders who could transform a story that was boring into something amusing and intriguing, even moving? I think it was the tone of their voices and the gestures they made with their hands and the suspense they created by reordering the stories. And they surprised you with the words they chose. Sometimes they made people and the places so vivid you thought those fictional characters were real. All these things dressed up a story, transformed it, and made it a beautiful tale. Now, I realize that as a child, I experienced art before I knew the word. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, everyone. Come join me on stage now. And we're going to have a brief, intimate conversation. If anyone has any comments or questions they'd like to share, just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. All right. Yeah. I'm going to pull one up and then... Alrighty, I just want to give another round of applause to all of the amazing writers. Thank you all so much for agreeing to be a part of this evening. And I guess just to kick things off, when I first invited you and told you the theme of transformation, I just want to know what initially kind of attracted you to the idea. Did you prepare new work for this evening? Did you pull from older work? If you did, what about that work related to the theme? And yeah, whoever wants to go. No one? Okay. No?
Well, since I went first before, I guess I'll go first again. As a Shinnecock, being first doesn't seem to mean very much nowadays in Southampton. So whatever, do with that what you will. Well, transforming every time that I find my leaving my home, which is my world, because Shinnecock Nation is my world and everything else is the outside. Please don't feel slighted. Just understand that that is our worldview. So there's always some kind of changing up that has to happen. I mean, very early on in life, those 2 miles between the reservation and the public school, there's a lot of changing going on in the minds of people because we will not be in proximity to our auntie or our grandparents or our cousin or our other cousin or our other cousin, because we will be on the outside. And we will most likely be surrounded by people who on some level deny us. And I mean, if they're not in those 8 square miles that Noah Donna offered over in 1640, then that means that most of those people are on unceded land. That's a nice way of saying it, but if we're talking about the 3,600 acres, then we're talking about stolen land. So you grow up as, what, persona non grata? Is that how that is said? I mean, who wants to live 95 years feeling like that? So transformation, of course, has been something that we have been made to do. We're good at it. We're adaptable. When I'm visiting in some area, I can talk like that. Or when I'm visiting in another area, I talk like that. And sometimes it can keep you out of the line of fire. But if you believe that the most transformative thing you can do is share and speak what is true, then places to hide become fewer and fewer. And when they say, the door is open, will you come in? You take a deep breath and you put your moccasin through that door. But you also hold it open for the rest of your relatives who have not been invited. Now that's a whole thing. We call it hidden in the light, because Shinnecock Indians don't have green eyes and light skin, okay? Native people are brown people. But sometimes I'm singled out and invited in. Oh, isn't that nice? Well, you may think so, but as soon as I open my mouth, they regret that. That's just the Presbyterian church, but. So transformation, that's all. I won't make another speech, but that's what I think about transformation.
Thank you. Thank you, Holly. No, thank you for opening your mouth. I hope you continue to do so. I'm going to move this back, actually. And I will stand. I don't want to block you. Does anyone else have anything that they want to share?
Well, I'll just say it's hard to talk about transformation without knowing that, on a daily basis, I think everyone is transforming in some way. That's why they made the movie, The Transformers. You can relate to transformation, and poets basically are transforming language. They're looking at words in order to use them in a unique way. As Pacifique said, you're listening to someone else's story, and to become interested in it, it has to be told in a way that's unusual. We've read and heard so much that in order to, entertain someone or make a game with words or whatever it is that you're trying to do, you have to transform those words in a way that is interesting. And the more you do that, the more interested you become yourself in the word transformation. You're not thinking of it like that. I mean, in your daily life, you're not going around, oh, I'm going to transform this and that and the other. But when Pacifique and I were talking earlier about how that started in his life, it started in the same way in my life. We sat around as children in Sag Harbor in a rented house where our parents were all looking for houses out here. And there was one big house, and there were many children who were in this house who didn't know each other at the beginning of the summer, but knew each other at the end. But at night, every night, we went outside and had to make up a ghost story. I mean, it was little children making up ghost stories to scare each other, and a new one every single night. And you're transformed by little kids being able to do that. You're never asked to do that in school. You're not entertaining anybody with your knowledge of fear and ghosts and whatever else you could think of. And so when you asked me to do this, yes, I did write a couple of new poems, but I decided at the last minute that I didn't really want to read a new poem because it takes a long time to understand what it is that you've written. It doesn't sink in kind of until there was a woman who was a poet here who read Ruth Siegel. I don't remember what her name was. Yes, who said it takes her 15 years to understand a poem that she's written, and I was like floored. But that came back to my mind when I saw those new poems. I was like, nah, these are not ready yet. Although when you write with some kind of political background, the tendency is wanting to read your thoughts on the matter and entertain people with the way you have thought about it. But really, it's best not to do it right away. That's what I think.
Yeah, sure. Mike's coming your way. Yeah.
Sorry, hi. A little question for Candace and a broad question for everybody. A little question for Candace. At some point in your poem, I couldn't tell if you said Sarah, like S-A-R-A, or Sarah, like S-E-R-R-A. There was a proper...
Richard Serra.
It was Richard Serra that you were referring to. So that work was specifically about the experience of fine art, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I got out of it. Wanted to fact check. Question for all of you. In reflecting upon what Talena just said, I would love to hear you talk maybe a little bit about the relationship between truth and transformation.
I'll start. Part of to go back to what Talena was, I'm going to combine both questions. The piece that I wrote was specifically for this event. Talena said, oh, the next theme is going to be transformation. And it went, bing, I like that word. I know that word. I can do something with that word. And what I spoke about that assignment was actually truthful. I had in my college, in my undergrad, in my senior year, I was tasked with an assignment to write an intellectual autobiography. And so we were tasked with this idea of tell your story, tell your life, and tell us how you became the intellectual being that you are. And it was very interesting because the relationship that I had with the professor, he pulled me out of my shell and gave me a safe place that wasn't a therapist's office. And so for the first time, I was telling my story to someone and sharing some of my deep, dark secrets with someone. And he looked at me in that little meeting when I sat one-on-one with him. He was like, sweetheart, there's nothing that you can say to me that is gonna scare me. And I was like, all right. You know, if you want to take that chance, okay. And we actually, the reason why I chose to write about that is because it was one of the most transformative things in my entire life. It started rewiring my neural network with a lot of things. Suddenly I was regaining access to my life and actually being able to live a life. And so to tell the truth, you know, there's the story that you tell yourself about yourself. There's the story you tell yourself to other people. And really the story that you tell yourself about yourself to yourself is probably the most important. So in terms of like healing, whether it's on a personal level or even on a collective level, you know, when you tell the truth, I feel like that is one of the most transformative things to do, because the truth is not really, sometimes the truth is really hard to swallow, you know, especially like if you're doing things to hurt yourself, right? You know, like you have to be honest with yourself, and sometimes that honesty can be really painful. You know, you have to like own up to like, oh yeah, no, I'm doing that, and I need to stop that habit. You know, nobody's, you know, I can blame people, but it's not going to get me anywhere. And so, a lot in my observations, I feel that societally speaking, we tend to talk a big game about truth and be truthful and, you know, all of this stuff, tell the truth and honesty, and we value integrity and all of these things, but we often ignore the hypocrisy in ourselves, but we'll point it out in other people. So that's been my sort of something that I grapple with, and I'm rambling and I apologize. My point is that when you approach something with truth and honesty, as long as it's truth and honesty within yourself, that's unshakable. You know, there's always going to be different perspectives. There's always going to be somebody that's going to challenge your narrative of your perspective, your how you look at something. But if you remain true to yourself and they remain true to themselves, and you agree to meet in a common ground and share your truths with the same openness, you know, the same sort of respect, you might start to be illuminated. I never thought of that way. I never thought of that way. But that's not going to come if you're trying to hide things in lies. You know what I mean? Like if you are not able to honestly say something, you know, I'm starting to ramble, so I'm going to quiet myself, sorry.
Yeah, it was.
I think we have a question back here.
Okay.
Just, this is for all of y'all, and really it's, forgive me, for everyone here. What is the last significant thing that you've changed your mind about? I used to be a dog person. I'm a cat person.
Well, you know, the easy one is what to read tonight. What to read tonight. What to read tonight. You know. The last thing, that's it. Yeah.
And what did you change it to?
No, as I said, I was going to read something new.
Oh, what to read it?
Yeah, and instead, I forgot to, this is my book, Muscle, written in 2020. That's what I read from. And I wasn't going to read from, I was just going to read a new poem, one new poem. That answers that question. But I want to go back to that other question that we were thinking about the what is truth question, that question is an interesting one because, it's a biblical question. It's like, that's Pontius Pilate and Jesus. He said, asked Jesus, what is truth? In other words, nobody knows what the larger meaning of truth. What is it? He wasn't talking about his particular truth. He was talking about universal truth. And he wanted an answer for that. And the good answer would have kept him from putting him on the cross. If he gave him the right what is truth answer. But he didn't do that. He kept quiet. And I think sometimes it's a good idea when a question like that is posed that you don't really know the explicit answer to. You don't have to make things up.
Well, yeah, I was just identifying with Candace on changing my mind of what to read tonight. Because those writings that documented that certain time in COVID, I haven't ever been able to talk about them. And so then I said, you know what, I'm gonna do that, unpack some of that.
Well, when you asked me personally, I did think about writing a new story, something I had been telling myself that I should do. But I felt like I wasn't ready to confront that. And I guess it comes back to the question you were asking, and I think Candace answered it really beautifully. There is a truth in the factual truth. You have a fact, but the factual truth, you can state them, but what is really truth in the end? If it was that simple, the facts, you can state them right there, but it doesn't change much. The other thing that when I read the theme, like word transformation, at first I thought about the story of a creation, and again I didn't know what to make of it. I think there is a poetic sentence, like in the beginning was the word, and whoever wrote the scripture, I think word is personified. I think they said, through word all things were made, and no, with word all things were made, and without word nothing was made that has been made. I mean, I don't know what to make of that except to contemplate the power of the word, but I think in the end, since we create from experience or from ideas or from matter, like our process is really transformation. Everything we do is a process of transformation, but it's difficult. For me, at least, the process has always been painful. That's why I wasn't able to write the story I was going to write, but hopefully I will. Thank you.
Wow, yeah, thank you.
Sorry. Can I say something on
Yes,
the
please.
original question that Pacifique was just responding to?
Yeah.
And I think it's in relation to what some people have already said, but I didn't write anything new, but I think that I looked for the transformation in, or I found transformation in many of my poems that I had already written. And it made me think about the many different levels of transformation. And I think someone said already, maybe Candace, that there's transformation happening all around us all the time, sometimes on a microscopic level. And then there's the huge transformations that that happen, and in relation to that truth question, there's the transformations that we want to happen. And I think for me, writing is an opportunity to kind of activate those transformations or write those transformations into being, or imagine things that you don't even imagine are possible in terms of transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some of my biggest moments of transformation in my own life, writing was always like the safe haven that kind of grounded me. And then unfortunately, when my life is better and I've transformed or evolved or whatever, I won't write as much. And then it's kind of this ongoing pattern. But I think we had one more question in the back from Barbara.
Thank you all so much for each of your presentations. Very reflective. And of course, Talena, thinking of transformation as universal. I'd like to ask the gentleman who opened the evening with his beautiful music. I listened to a lot of Carl Nakai, and I'm wondering, the flute, is it universal to all indigenous history? And was it originally made out of what it came from?
Thank you. Actually, the second song I played was a Carlos Nakai song. The flute, my flute here was actually a gift from my mother and my aunt when they played at, was it Minneapolis, the Women's Festival, something like that. I have a bunch of flutes. I make flutes. That's a mahogany flute, and it's I think it's a 6 pentatonic flute. I have a bunch of different keyed flutes, different sounds, different resonance. As far as I know, our traditional flutes here on the East Coast were reed flutes, and there were 4-finger flutes or bone flutes. This kind of flute, I would say, is more of a modern kind of pan Native American style flute, or maybe like a Great Lakes style flute. So that answers that question. And the first song I played was a Cherokee song taught to me by my Uncle Louie. But yeah, thank you for asking me a question, because I didn't really have much to say about transformation.
Right. Well, that's it.
So
Thank
cool.
you very
Thanks.
much.